Rambam. We continue in the first book. Begin today the laws of Vedas Kechavim, idolatry, laws of worship of stars and of statutes. They contain 51 commandments, 2 positive, 49 negative, and they are not to show interest in worship of false gods, not to stray after thoughts of one's hearts and the sights of one's eyes behold, and not to curse God, not to worship false gods with the types of service which they are customarily served, not to bow down to false gods, not to make an idol for yourself, not to make an idol even for others, to make images even for decoration, not to pursue others to worship false gods, not to burn an apostate city, never to rebuild it, not to derive benefit from any of its property, not to persuade a single individual to worship false gods, not to love Amasis, not to reduce one's hatred for him, not to save his life. Um, not to save his life, not to advance any arguments on his behalf, not to withhold information will lead to his conviction, not to prophecy in the name of false gods, not to listen to anyone who prophesies in the name of false gods, not to give false prophecy even in the name of God, not to fear executing a false prophet, not to swear in the name of false God, not to perform deeds associated with an oiv, not to perform deeds associated with yoni. These are, sorcery kind of things. Not to offer to Melech, not to erect a pillar for purpose of worship, not to prostrate oneself on hewn stones, not to plant an ashera, a tree, not as a certain type of tree or tree made for idolatry, not to destroy false gods and to destroy rather false gods and all other objects of worship. Akoy, can you let in? Thank you. Not to benefit from false gods and other objects of worship, not to benefit from ornaments that have adorned false gods, not to establish a covenant with nations who worship false gods, not to show them favor, not to allow them to settle in our land, not to follow their customs or manner of dress, not to act as soothsayer, not to practice black magic, not to practice divination, not to cast spells, not to seek information from the dead, not to cancel the oath, not to cancel the dioni, not to practice sorcery, not to shave temples of your heads, not to shave the corners of your beards, for a man not to wear women's apparel, for a woman not to wear armament of a man's apparel, not to tattoo one's body, not to make cuts in one's flesh, not to tear out hair in mourning for the dead. Especially these mitzvahs are contained within chapters of So now he's going to go through some history over here. During the times of Enosh, the grandson of Adam, lived from the year 235 until after creation till 1140. Mankind made a great mistake, and the wise man of the generation gave thoughtless counsel. Enosh himself was one of those who erred. Their mistake was as follows. They said God created stars and spheres with which to control the world. He placed them on high and treated them with honor, making them servants who minister before him. Accordingly, it's fit to praise and glorify them and to treat them with honor. They perceive this to be the will of God. Blessed be he. Um, Accordingly, it's fitting to praise and glorify them and to treat them with honor. They perceive them to be the will of God, blessed be he, that they magnify and honor those that whom he magnified and honored. Just as the king desires that his servants who stand before him be honored. Indeed, doing so is an expression of honor to the king. Well, that was a mistake, right? Because as we learn in Tanya, right, there's nothing else but God. He doesn't divvy out his power. Excuse me. After conceiving of this notion, they began to construct temples to the stars and offer sacrifices to them. They would praise and glorify them with words and prostrate themselves before them, because by doing so, they would, according to the false conception, be fulfilling the will of God. This was the essence of worship of false gods, and this was the rationale of those who worshiped them. They would not say that there was no other God except for this star. This message was conveyed by Jeremiah, who declared, I will not fear you, King of the nations, for to you it is fit. Among all the wise men of the nations and all of their kingdoms, there was none like you. They have one foolish and senseless notion. They conceive of their empty teachings as wood. All know that you alone are God. Their foolish error consists of conceiving of this emptiness as your will. After many years, in number 2 passed. One second, I just gotta move my feet for a second. Okay. Second. Okay. Oh, I'm blocking it there. If I put it elsewhere. Let's see if I can do that. Give me a second. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, number 2. After many years passed, and there arose people, false prophets, who told the people that God had commanded them to say, "Serve this star, or all stars, sacrifice to it, offer libations." Right. So now this is expanding on the idolatry, right? Build a temple for it and make an image of it, so that all people, including the women, children, and the common people, could bow down to it. He would inform them, this false prophet, of a form that he had conceived and tell them that this is the image of a particular star, claiming that this was revealed to him in prophetic vision. In this manner, the people began to make images of temples under trees and on tops of mountains and hills. People would gather together and bow down to them, and the false prophet would say, "This image is the source of benefit or harm. It is appropriate to serve it and fear it." The priest would tell them, "This service will enable you to multiply and be successful. Do this and this, or do not do this and this." Subsequently, other deceivers arose and declared that the specific star, sphere, or angel had spoken to them and commanded them, "Serve me in this manner." he would then relate a mode of service, telling them, do this, not do this. Thus, these practices spread throughout the world. People would serve images with strange practices or more distorted than the other, offer sacrifices to them, and bow down to them. As years passed, God's glorious and awesome name was forgotten by the entire population. It was no longer part of their speech or thought. They no longer knew him. Originally, there was God, but God was, placed these celestial beings, right? They're servants of God. And now they forgot about this, about God, and there's only the servant, even though originally it was also a mistake. Thus, all the common people and the women and children who would know only the images of wood and stone and the temples of stone in which they were trained from their childhood to bow down and serve, and whose name they swore. The wise men among them would think that there was no God other than the stars and spheres, for whose sake and resemblance of which they had made these images. The eternal rock was not recognized or known by anyone in the world, the exception of few individuals like Chanaich, Mesushalach, Noach, Shem, and Aver. Yeah. Shem said, the world continues its fashion, the pillar, the world, until the patriarch Abraham was born. After this mighty man was weaned, Abraham, he began to explore and think. Though he was a child, he began to think incessantly throughout the day and night, wondering, how is it possible for a sphere to continue to revolve without having anyone controlling it? Who is causing it to revolve? Surely it does not cause itself to revolve. He had no teacher, nor was anyone to inform him. Rather, he mired in or cast him among the foolish idolaters. His father, mother, and all other people around him were idol worshippers, and he would worship with them. However, in his heart, he was exploring and gaining understanding. Ultimately, he appreciated the way of truth and understood the path of righteousness. Through his accurate comprehension, he realized that there was one God who controlled the sphere and that he created everything, and there was no other God among all the other entities. He knew that the entire world was making a mistake. What caused him to cause? Yeah, okay. He knew the entire world was making a mistake. They caused them to err. Was their service of stars and images which made them lose awareness of the truth? Abraham was 40 years old when he became aware of his creator. When he recognized and knew, he began to formulate replies to the inhabitants who were accustomed to debate with them, telling them that they were not following the proper path. He broke their idols and began to teach the people that it is fitting to serve only the God of the world. To him alone is fitting to bow down, sacrifice, and offer libation. So that the people, those who had to bow down and sacrifice him, the future church to recognize them. Conversely, it's fitting to destroy and break all the images, lest all the people err concerning them, like those people who thought that there was no other gods besides these images. When he overcame them through his strength of his arguments, the king desired to kill him, and he was saved by miracle and left for Haran. There he began to call out loud voice to all people and inform them there was one God in the entire world and it's proper to serve him. He would go out and call to the people, gathering them in city after city, country after country, until he became the land of Canaan, proclaiming God's existence the entire time, and that he called there in the name of the Lord, eternal God. Yeah. Okay. He was able to gather them, bring them a statement, and we proclaim to each of them according to the understanding until they turn to the path of truth. Ultimately, thousands and myriads gathered around him. These are the men of the house of Abraham. He planted in their hearts a great fundamental principle, composed text about it, and taught it to his son Isaac. Isaac taught it others and turned their hearts to God. He also taught Jacob, appointed him as a teacher. Jacob taught others and turned his hearts to all those who gathered around him to God. He also taught all of his children. He selected Levi and appointed him as the leader, established him as the head of the academy to teach them the way of God and observe the mitzvahs of Abraham. Jacob commanded his sons in leadership and should not depart from the descendants of Levi, so that the teachings would not be forgotten. Constant proceeded and gathered strength among the descendants of Jacob and those who collected around them until they became a nation which knew God. When the Jews extended their stay in Egypt, however, they learned from the Egyptians these and began worshiping the stars as they did, with the exception of the tribe of Levi, who clung to the mitzvahs of the patriarchs of the tribe of Levi, never served false gods. Within a short time, the fundamental principle of Abraham had planted would have been uprooted in the sense of Jacob would have returned to the errors of the world and their crookedness, because God's love for us, and to uphold the oath which he made to Abraham, our patriarch. He brought forth Moses, our teacher, master of all prophets, and sent him to redeem the Jews. After Moshe, our teacher, prophesied, and God chose Israel as his inheritance. He crowned them the mitzvahs and informed them the path to serve them, and teaching them the judgment prescribed for idol worship and all those that stray after it. Okay, we're going to stop here.
Thank you.
Yom Sameach.
Good to see you.
Yeah, Freilich important, everybody.